Oh, did you guys see the Ukraine drone stuff? So, apparently Ukraine, basically, what they did is they got some Russian truck drivers to load up the tops of these trucks with, like, dozens of drones. Thank you for the 5 gifted memberships, Nate. Hugely appreciated. Thank you. Yeah, they load them up with dozens of these drones that cost like a few $100s each, basically. And they're attached to fiber optic cables, I believe, so they can't be jammed. And they drove these drones like 3,000 miles into Russia, right up next to the airfields where they keep their nuclear bombers. And then the truck driver, they just got a signal, and the drones will just come out of the top and just fly right next to the bombers and blow up with like C4 on them. And it's like the whole operation costed like a few $1,000s basically, and destroyed like billions of dollars worth of equipment. It's like one of the most insane attacks in military history. It's like totally just crazy, and like a novel tactic that just we haven't seen yet, because drone warfare has only just become so widespread in Ukraine, Russia. But like this can basically, my understanding is this can basically happen to any country. Like, so there's like a big fear, and this sort of like, this is something that's made me realize a little bit like why there is so much fear mongering about like China and stuff like that. Because China have a bunch of warehouses in like the US and the UK. In theory, given they're like state owned, because every company in China is like partially state owned, that they could do the same thing. They could deploy, if the intel was bad enough and the US didn't see it coming, there isn't really a countermeasure that can be used to stop this happening. Because we just don't, like, you can't jam these drones because they're attached to fiber optic cables. They're like, I think they're like too small or something, or like, they won't see them coming. I don't know if they can get them with like automated guns or anything. Like the Russians would try and like shoot them down with rifles or whatever, with AKs, and they were just like missing. So it's like a crazy risk. And the thing is that the reason these bombers were so easily destroyed is because under a bunch of international agreements, these nuclear bombers have to be kept outside so that satellites can always see them. Because obviously no one wants other countries being able to deploy nuclear bombers without anyone knowing. So everyone's just kind of in this position where you're just like, what can we do? You just have to hope your intelligence holds up and you know these fucking trucks are coming. That's basically it. That's all you're relying on. Anyway, let's watch this video. I'm going to grab a coffee. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
The most daring and devastating Ukrainian attacks on Russian troops since the start of the war. Tonight, President Zelensky said his forces used 117 drones in strikes on Russian air bases from deep inside Russia itself, targeting warplanes, including strategic bombers. Now, the scale of the operation is remarkable, with the strikes hitting at least 4 airfields from western Russia across to Moscow and reaching the country's far east, thousands of miles from Ukraine. The operation, codenamed Spider's Web, comes on the eve of planned peace talks between Ukraine and Russia in Turkey tomorrow. Paul Adams has our top story from Kiev.
Far from Ukraine's borders, an attack of astonishing audacity. Russian strategic bombers picked off one by a fleet of drones. Ukraine calling this Operation Spider's Web, personally overseen by President Zelensky. One of Kiev's boldest attacks so far, a reminder, despite Russia's overwhelming strength in numbers, that Ukraine is a resourceful, determined enemy. Sources say this took a year and a half to prepare. Dozens of drones smuggled into Russia, stored on wooden pallets, loaded onto trucks, driven to distant airbases and launched remotely. Swarms of drones picked up on social media from Siberia to the Arctic Circle. At a petrol station north of Irkutsk, a glimpse of the operation in progress. With smoke already rising behind, a drone emerges from the truck and heads off to join the attack. Moments later, another, and gunfire as police officers try to bring it down. Ukraine claims to have done a staggering $7 billion worth of damage and knocked out a third of the planes Russia uses to deliver cruise missiles.
Ми розуміємо, з ким маємо справу.
We know exactly whom we are dealing with. We will defend ourselves by every means available to us, available to Ukraine, available to Ukrainians. Not for a single moment did we want this war. We offered the Russians a ceasefire.
Earlier, a different kind of wreckage, this the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, after the country suffered another major drone and missile attack. Elsewhere, 12 Ukrainian soldiers were killed at a training base, the head of Ukraine's land forces tendering his resignation. What chance then for another round of peace talks set to take place in Istanbul? Russian and Ukrainian delegations are expected to be there, but after 24 hours of mayhem, the omens for a breakthrough do not seem good. Paul Adams, BBC News.
We're going to get more from Paul in a moment, but as he was just saying, this sophisticated attack was more than a year in the planning. Ellie Price is with me now. What more do we know about Operation Spider's Web and its targets, Ellie?
Well, Clive, as Paul said, it was an attack astonishing in its audacity on multiple military sites across Russia. What we know is that the Olena air base near Murmansk in the northeast of Russia, near Finland, was hit. There were also attacks to the southwest and northeast of Moscow and far to the east.
You know what is kind of crazy, but also super annoying about stuff like this is that when there's it feels like when something like this happens, there is like a huge burst of like public support and public like will to fund a country if they pull something like this off. Like I was watching Asmongold talk about this yesterday, and it's the first time he has said that he supports Ukraine before, but he's never been like particularly firm about any positions on it. And during the course of that segment, someone brought up like the MAGA talking point that Trump, not that Trump, that Zelensky wants the war to keep going. Zelensky wants a war. And actually, for the first time ever, I heard Asmongold say, no, I don't think that's true. I get what you think about it, I don't think that's true. And I was stunned. I was shocked. I was like, wait, what? This almost sounds like you're okay with, like, funding them. And it's just really annoying that this is what has to, like, it's all based on, yeah, it's like rockification. It's like, whoa, they're awesome. I want to back them now. And that's how they decide whether to fund it. Not based on some vaguely intelligent analysis of, like, how the international world order should work and how countries shouldn't just be able to bully smaller countries and expand their borders. Nothing based on that. Just, oh, whoa, they look really fucking awesome right now. I want to give them money. It's just so annoying.
Here, over 4,000 kilometres from the front line, deep in Siberia, where it was confirmed that this remote airbase in Belena was hit. And it's here that this incredible footage was captured, showing the destruction of planes on the tarmac. These are the drones that were used in the attack, thought to be quadcopters with 4 rotors, relatively cheap and domestically made. The bombs they carried didn't need to be big if they were targeted so precisely. Ukraine says 117 drones were used, each with its own pilot. Sources say the drones were hidden in custom-made wooden crates that were taken over the border and driven on trucks to near the targets, and then launched remotely.
There's certainly been a degree of mythology in Russia that the motherland is safe and no enemy will be able to harm it. Well, Kyiv has shown that that's not true. They can reach anywhere. The fact that Ukraine was striking thousands of kilometers away from the front line means basically Russian military planners now, their mind has to just be paranoid from the outside.
Ukraine says it's destroyed 40 Russian bombers, more than a third of the Russian fleet capable of carrying cruise missiles. The aircraft damaged include the Tupolev Tu-95 strategic bomber that can launch up to 8 missiles. The Tu-22 long-range bomber was also targeted, as well as the A-50, seen as the eyes and ears in the sky, Russia's early warning and control aircraft. Now, the White House tonight said they didn't know about the attack beforehand. Operation Spiderweb was overseen by President Zelensky himself. He said Ukraine had an Operation HQ inside Russian territory, located right next to an office of Russia's secret
exactly.
service.
This is something that, in theory, like, this isn't even a military operation necessarily. Like, a domestic terror group could do this kind of thing. Like, you could literally... It's so insanely easy to do. It's, like, actually kind of concerning.
Now, and said that the coordinated attack was achieved solely by Ukraine. Clive.
All right. Ellie, thank you. Ellie Price there. Let's rejoin Paul Adams, who's live in Kiev for us now. Paul, this is a big deal, no question about it. And the timing, surely no coincidence, given those peace talks that are due to take place in Turkey tomorrow.
Yeah, Clive, look, it is...
It's just crazy thinking that when drones first showed up, it was like all the fear-mongering about them was like, oh, people are going to use them to spy through windows and look in your back garden and all this fucking shit. But no, people are going to strap bombs to them and fucking destroy your entire country's infrastructure.
It's hard to exaggerate the sheer audacity of what the Ukrainians have just done. You know, we're used to stories of ingenuity and determination, the sinking of the Moskva warship in 2022, the truck-borne attack on the Kerch Bridge the same year, and just a month ago, using
power grid is
missiles mounted on maritime drones to shoot down a Russian jet. These are all extraordinary feats of engineering and enterprise, but what we've seen today tops all of that. And the Ukrainians are, not surprisingly, cock-a-hoop. But there is a political message here. A colleague of ours from the Ukrainian service said that he was recently in conversation with a member of the government who told him that the problem with Washington was that the Americans had already decided that Ukraine had lost and that the Trump administration...
Sounds like you're advocating and supporting this kind of attack. Wow, thank you, Lumpy Willie. #1 commentary fan, Lumpy Willie, coming in with the crazy analysis.
Entire strategy was based on that assumption. Well, as the negotiators head back to Istanbul for another round of negotiations over a ceasefire, what Ukraine is saying loudly and emphatically is, if you think we're done, think again. Donald Trump may famously think we do not have any cards to play, but look what happened today. We certainly do.
All right, Paul, thank you for that. Paul Adams there live in Kiev.
Wow. Wow. Awesome stuff. What's this?
On board a warship that will one day be protected by fleets of drones, the Prime Minister was in Glasgow to announce the future of the armed forces in what he called a blueprint for a battle-ready, armour-clad nation.
We are moving to warfighting readiness as the central purpose of our...
Co-worker literally just walked up and started talking about the drones. I was able to act very informed. Thank you, Kuihman.
our armed forces. When we are being directly threatened by states with advanced military forces, the most effective way to deter them is to be ready, to deliver peace through strength.
If technology is multiplying military capabilities, the war in Ukraine is demonstrating a real and present threat, which the government says it will meet with a hybrid Royal Navy, mixing ships, submarines and drones, much greater offensive cyber capabilities, and new homeland missile defences. There will also be lots of new kit, 6 new munitions factories in the UK, up to 12 nuclear-powered submarines and 7,000 long-range missiles. What is the threat that all this kit is needed to counter?
UK military is beyond 0 troops and no one wants to join. We don't need troops. We don't need troops.
Russia that has no intention whatsoever of stepping back. And we're also in an environment where, frankly, I think it's also sunk in with everyone that the United States is going to do less to support European security. And that includes the UK as well. We still have an important defence relationship with the United States, but it's going to be nothing like it's been, certainly for the last 80 years and including for the last decade.
The review's authors suggested defence spending would ultimately need to rise to 3%, something the government has so far only called an ambition.
Are you committed to spending what you need to deliver everything that's in this review, or is it just an ambition?
We are committed to spending what we need to deliver this review.
It's a sharp change of direction after
Dude, so future war is full of swarms of hunter-killer drones that zero in on your smartphone, which you always carry. So true.
decades of falling defence budgets, but the opposition think the 3% target must be hit sooner.
We need to see it by the end of this Parliament. Otherwise, many of the plans which they've put, even in this Strategic Defence Review, just will not happen. We need to give certainty to the defence industry as well.
And those who have served agree the government needs to move more quickly.
Unless it's fully funded, then frankly it will not be the success that the government wants it to be. It's a bit like in 1937 saying to Hitler, hold on, don't attack us until 1946 because we're not ready.
The Prime Minister talked about a defence dividend for British industry today, and there may well be one, but only because a much larger proportion of taxpayers' money is now going to be spent on defending the United Kingdom. Carl Din, ITV News, Glasgow.
So how will these plans help the UK to defend itself then? Here's our political correspondent Romilly Weeks with the details. Romilly, these warnings from the Prime Minister do seem increasingly urgent, don't they?
Yes, Mary, the overwhelming message is pretty ominous, and one line from the review really struck me. It's no longer unthinkable that the whole nation will go to war and not just the armed forces. So with that sobering thought in mind, the review places a significant focus on homeland security, with the MOD facing 90,000 cyber attacks from state-linked sources over the past 2 years. Now the military needs to innovate at wartime pace with a new Cyber M command system to coordinate the fight back. The UK's critical national infrastructure is to be better protected, with the Royal Navy securing undersea cables and infrastructure. And there will be £1 billion of new funding for homeland air and missile defence. But what there won't be is this, an Israeli-style Iron Dome protective shield for the UK, unless the government commits significantly more money. As for threats abroad, the most obvious threat to European security is from Russia attacking a NATO ally. Key elements of the UK increasing its war-fighting readiness will be beefing up our nuclear deterrent with a £15 billion investment in the Sovereign Warhead programme and more nuclear-powered submarines, 6 new factories providing an always-on supply of munitions and harnessing cutting-edge technology, including AI, robotics and drones that we've seen transforming warfare on the battlefields of Ukraine. But hollowed-out troop numbers may prove a challenge to all of this. You'd have to go all the way back to the time when Napoleon was the threat to find numbers so low, with just 136,000 full-time armed forces personnel. Compare that to Russia with 1.5 million, or China at 2 million troops. So the review recommends increasing the number of reservists by 20%, releasing personnel in back-office functions to frontline roles, and the government says it's aiming for a small increase in the numbers of full-time soldiers too. But all of this is dependent, as Carl says, on the government finding the money to increase defence spending to 3% over the next Parliament. And remember, so far the Prime Minister has only said that his ambition,
pushing Diamond
Mary,
and Rivals, he'll be allowed to smoke in the drone pilot room. Okay.
Some way off being set in stone.
OK, Romilly Weeks, thank you. And on the subject of funding, our political correspondent Carl Dinnan is in Glasgow, where the Prime Minister launched the plans earlier today. So, Carl, big question, where was the money going to come from?
I play Iron Fist.
It does depend a little bit,
actually,
Mary, on how much money we're talking about. The Defence Review was supposed to set out what could be done with 2.5% of GDP, which the government has already found by cutting the aid budget. But as we said, the defence reviewers suggested today that they would need to get to that 3% target, which the government is only talking about doing sometime in the middle of the next decade. That's an extra £17 billion.
Okay.